and make it a part of its own expression. So you think of Dizzy Gillespie going to Cuba all those years ago, and suddenly there's Afro-Cuban jazz. And that's just one example of the ways that the jazz world encroaches and adopts everything that it encounters that's of value. And I hope to say this is one more small step forward.
And just so listeners who aren't that familiar with the record, we're talking about Scotland, we're talking about Germany, we're really talking about the full global package here. Some interesting song choices too, Kurt. Bjork, who we heard there, U2. I'm wondering if you hear these songs through your life and you archive them in your mind and say, hey, maybe that's something that I can use.
Sometimes. The Scottish thing you mentioned, it was actually a piece that I learned many years ago before I was even thinking of being a professional musician, and I was just backpacking around in Scotland, and I happened upon some old codgers, and we were having some drinks together, and I asked them to regale me with some stories of their childhood, and they started to sing songs, and I remembered a couple of them, and the Loch Tay Boat song was one that has stayed in my mind all these years, and I haven't had the right opportunity to record it as a jazz person, because it's not really a jazz song. But now that I've got friends around the world, in this case Tommy Smith and the Scottish National Jazz Orchestra, is a perfect opportunity to reiterate that song in a jazz context.
On the record, you sing in Spanish, French, Portuguese, German, and of course English. I can't imagine the challenges, not in just learning the language, but then having the right interpretation through the lyric and through the song.
It takes some work, for sure. I hope I did it okay. I can't really tell myself. I mean, usually if it sounds good. The reports I've had is that my French is passable. My German is full of consonants, which seems appropriate. My Portuguese is cute. My Spanish is actually pretty good on the record, I think. I'm the least gringo as a Spanish speaker, so that's all right.
Is it just about learning the tune in those languages, or do you take something away from it? Where are you able to communicate in these languages as well?
Man, I can order beer in a whole bunch of languages.
Well, you got to prioritize. So good. As much as you're an innovator, you're also steeped in tradition, and you usually reference Sinatra at some point in your show. This is the 100th year since Frank's was born. For people that have maybe moved past some of this, how would you describe why Frank Sinatra is as good as he was?
Well, man, there's any number of reasons. I mean, he really set the standard for swinging singers, certainly male swinging singers. He's the one essential ingredient. You can't go around him. You can't ignore it. You got to go through it. And I would say that for anybody who feels like he's not, try to do any really standard swinging arrangement with a big band or an orchestra and try to do it without Sinatra's influence. And what it'll sound like is you're just doing it wrong. You've got to have that ingredient in there. And for a while, I think you probably have to overdo it, as any jazz person does when you're learning from the great masters. You have to sound a little bit too much like them to incorporate them fully into your own sound, so that when you're out there doing your thing, you have a kind of a family resemblance to the greatest possible artists, but at the same time, it is your sound. And as I say, you can't ignore it. You can't skip the step. You got to go through it so that it's an organic part of who you are.
When I look at your schedule, Kurt, it's relentless, and I was wondering about your voice. Now, the expectations the audience has on every night that you perform is that you are going to blow them away. And I'm just wondering, with the constant performing, the travel, the toll that it must take on your voice, and I'm wondering how precious you are with it. Is there some regiment, like a major league pitcher, that you have to go through?
No, I should really grow up one of these days. My contribution to what I do is that I definitely warm up. I definitely try to be some version of healthy. I try not to drink too much, bourbon. And I don't really smoke cigarettes or anything like that. That's never been a big turn on for me. I think that's probably the biggest part of it. That and the fact that I'm just kind of built to sing, and I'm grateful for it. That means that it kind of works out most of the time.